I was sitting in the chemo chair when my daughter called to say she wasn't coming. Not a text. An actual call, which I suppose was her way of making it feel less cruel. The IV needle was already in my arm. The nurse, a young woman named Harriet Bloom, who always wore her hair in 2 braids, was adjusting the drip when my phone buzzed in my lap. I saw my daughter Suzanne's name on the screen and felt something warm move through my chest. I thought she was calling to say she was close, maybe parking the car, maybe 5 minutes away. "Mom, I can't make it today." Her voice sounded distracted. Background noise, office sounds. Phillips has that tournament and I completely forgot to rearrange my calendar. I stared at the ceiling tile above my head. There was a water stain shaped like a small dog. I had memorized that stain over the past 3 weeks. "Okay," I said, "you'll be fine. You've done this before." And she hung up. Harriet didn't say anything. She just quietly handed me a warmer blanket, the heated kind they kept in a cabinet near the nurse's station, and tucked it around my legs without being asked. I hadn't told her I was cold. She'd noticed anyway. I was 64 years old, 8 weeks into chemotherapy for breast cancer, and the only person who had shown up to any of my treatments so far was a woman I'd known for less than a month. People think loneliness is a feeling. It isn't. It's a temperature. And that afternoon in the infusion center at Mercy General in Louisville, Kentucky, I was colder than I had ever been in my life. My husband, Walter Greer, died 4 years before my diagnosis. Heart attack, sudden. The kind that gives no warning and asks no permission. He was in the garage fixing a lawnmower that had been broken for 2 summers, and then he wasn't anywhere at all. After 41 years of marriage, I learned what it felt like to sleep. In the exact center of a king-sized bed, both arms stretched out, touching nothing. Suzanne had been attentive at first. She drove in from Lexington for the funeral. She stayed a week. She called every Sunday for about 2 months, then every other Sunday, then occasionally, then mostly on holidays. I didn't blame her. She had a husband, my son-in-law Randall, who had opinions about how much time Suzanne devoted to her mother. And she had Philip, my 12-year-old grandson, and she had her career in hospital administration, which was one of those jobs that sounds like it should run on a schedule but never really does. I told myself I understood. I believed it, mostly. That's what mothers do. We metabolize disappointment until it becomes part of us. Something quiet living in the chest that we don't mention at dinner. Then they found the lump and the metabolizing became a lot harder. I called Suzanne the day after the diagnosis. She cried, which I hadn't expected, and for a moment I thought maybe this would pull us back toward each other the way emergencies sometimes do with families. She said, "Mom, whatever you need." She meant it when she said it. I genuinely believe that, but meaning something and doing something are different muscles. And some people let one go soft without noticing. By my 3rd infusion, I had stopped calling to remind her. That was the afternoon Harriet Bloom became someone I could not imagine my life without. She had walked into my curtained bay before the drip started, checked my chart, and then done something none of the other nurses had done. She pulled the visitor's chair close to my bed, sat down, and said, "Do you want company while we get this going, or would you rather have quiet?" I looked at her for a moment. Nobody had asked me that. "Company," I said. "Please." She smiled. She had a gap between her front teeth that made her look younger than she was, and tired eyes that told you she was older than she looked. We talked for 40 minutes about nothing significant. A peach cobbler recipe, a book she was reading, the way Louisville traffic had changed since they rerouted one of the main downtown corridors. When she got up to check on another patient, I realized my hands had stopped trembling. After that, she always found a few minutes between patients to stop in. Sometimes just to refill my water. Sometimes to sit for a moment and ask how I'd slept. Small things. The kind of small things that, when you're ill and alone, become the architecture holding your day together. Suzanne came to my 2nd infusion. She was on her phone for most of it and left 40 minutes early for a meeting. She said she was sorry. She brought flowers, which was kind. Randall sent a gift basket with fruit and nuts, and a card he had clearly signed without reading what was printed inside. By the 5th infusion, Suzanne had stopped coming at all. She had reasons every time, and the reasons were real enough. Philip's baseball, a conference in Cincinnati, a remodeling project at their house that had gone over schedule. I stopped arguing with the reasons. I started just going alone. Except I was never entirely alone. Because Harriet was always there. One evening after my 6th treatment, I was slow leaving. I felt worse than usual, dizzy and heavy. And I sat in the parking lot in my car for almost 20 minutes, not trusting myself to drive. There was a knock on my window. Harriet, still in her scrubs, holding her car keys. "I'll follow you home," she said. It wasn't a question. "You just finished a 12-hour shift," I told her. "And now I'm going to follow you home," she said. "So let's go." I cried the entire drive. Not because I was frightened, though I was. Because someone had looked at me and decided I mattered enough to go out of their way. I had forgotten what that felt like. She walked me inside. Made tea. Found the crackers in the cabinet above the stove and brought them without being asked. She sat at my kitchen table for an hour while I talked, really talked. The kind of talking you can only do when you're too exhausted to keep your guard up. I told her about Walter. About the first months after he died, when I still bought 2 cups of coffee every morning out of pure muscle memory. About how grief changes shape over time but never fully leaves, how it becomes a roommate you learn to work around. Harriet listened. Not the way people listen when they're waiting for their turn to speak. Actually listened. Before she left, she wrote her cell number on the back of a grocery receipt she found in her pocket. "If you feel strange tonight, call me," she said. "Doesn't matter what time." I taped that receipt to my refrigerator. 2 days later, Suzanne called. She asked how the last treatment went. I said fine. She said she was going to try to make it to the next one. I said that would be nice. The conversation lasted 6 minutes. When I hung up, I looked at the receipt on my refrigerator for a long time. The following week, I found something I wasn't supposed to find. I had asked Suzanne to help me gather some financial paperwork for my oncologist's office, something about insurance coverage and a secondary billing address. Suzanne had offered, months ago, to help me organize my files after Walter died. She'd spent a Saturday at my house going through the filing cabinet in the study. I was grateful at the time. I trusted her completely. What I found, tucked into the back of a manila folder between my homeowner's insurance and an old car title, was a printed email chain. 3 pages, folded neatly. The emails were between Suzanne and Randall. They were about me. The earliest one was dated 6 weeks before my diagnosis. Before I had any idea I was sick, in it, Suzanne wrote, "She's getting more scattered. I think it's only going to get worse. We should probably start thinking about next steps." Randall replied, "Talk to the estate attorney before she decides anything on her own. Make sure you're the one managing that conversation." I sat down on the floor of my study. My legs simply stopped working. There were 4 more emails after that. They discussed my house. The one Walter and I bought in 1987. The one where Suzanne learned to ride her bicycle in the driveway. They discussed my investments, which Randall referred to as the portfolio, as if the money were already his. There was a line in the last email that I have memorized word for word, because I have never been able to stop hearing it. Randall had written, "She doesn't need to be involved in the specifics yet. Just get her comfortable with the idea of letting you take the lead." Her comfortable with the idea. I was not scattered. I had misplaced my reading glasses once and mentioned it to Suzanne during a phone call as a joke. That was the entire evidence of my supposed decline. I stayed on that floor for a long time. The afternoon light moved across the room. A car went by outside. Everything looked the same, as it always looked, and nothing was the same at all. That evening, I called Harriet. I told her what I'd found. My voice stayed steady through the first half of the telling, and then it didn't anymore. She let me cry without rushing me toward the end of it. When I finished, she didn't say what most people say, which is something reassuring and soft that papers over the truth. She said, "You need to talk to a lawyer, and you need to do it before Suzanne knows you've seen those emails." I called my accountant the next morning. He had handled my finances for 9 years, since Walter's death, and knew my situation better than anyone. His name was Theodore Marsh, and when I told him what I'd found, there was a pause on his line that told me he wasn't entirely surprised. "How much does Suzanne know about your full financial picture?" he asked carefully. "I assumed she knew some of it," I said. "Walter and I were never secretive about being comfortable." "Comfortable," Theodore said, "might be an understatement." He asked me to come into his office. I hadn't looked closely at the numbers in years. Walter had been the one who watched the portfolio, who understood the way the investment structures worked, who met with the financial advisors every quarter. After he died, I had kept Theodore on and trusted him to manage things responsibly, which he had. What I had not done was pay close attention to the outcomes. When Theodore laid the statements across his desk, I sat very still. The number was substantially more than I had understood it to be. Property. I hadn't known Walter retained an interest in. Dividend accounts that had compounded quietly for over a decade. A life insurance trust that had never been discussed with Suzanne because Walter hadn't wanted to create expectations. "Your estate is worth considerably more than your daughter likely realizes," Theodore said. "Though based on what you're describing, she may be trying to find out." I looked at the numbers for a long time. What does my current will say? Theodore folded his hands. Everything to Suzanne, as sole beneficiary. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, with a cup of tea I didn't drink, and thought about my daughter. Not the daughter who had written those emails. The earlier one. The little girl who used to come into my bedroom during thunderstorms and press her cold feet against my legs. The teenager who cried at her father's college graduation film. Because, she said, he looked so young and happy. The woman who had held my hand at Walter's graveside and whispered, "We'll be okay, Mom, we'll figure it out." I had believed her. I thought about what Harriet had said 2 nights before, sitting across from me at this same table. Sometimes the people who need us most are the ones we walk past every day. And sometimes the people who stay aren't the ones we expected. She had said it quietly, the way she said most things, not to make a point, but simply because it was true. She talked like that, Harriet. Like she'd already thought things through and the words came out settled. This next morning I made 2 calls. The first was to Theodore, to arrange a meeting with his estate planning colleague. The second was to a woman at Mercy General's Patient Services Office, who gave me the name of a patient advocate resource in Louisville's. Suzanne called that afternoon. She wanted to know if I'd thought about streamlining my finances. She used that word, streamlining. I said I had an appointment with my accountant that week. Her voice shifted slightly as when I said it. A micromovement I might have missed a year ago. "That's great, Mom," she said. "I could come with you." "I'll be fine," I said. Suzanne came to dinner 3 days later. She brought Randall, which surprised me. And Randall was more attentive than he had been in years, asking about my treatment, complimenting the house. Philip sat beside me and told me about baseball. The only person at that table I believed entirely. After dinner, Randall leaned back in his chair with a particular kind of casualness I recognized as rehearsed. He mentioned that Suzanne had been reading about financial guardianship structures. He called it planning ahead. He said, "We just want to make sure that if anything changes with your health, we're in a position to help." Changes with your health. I looked at my daughter. She was looking at the tablecloth. "What does that mean exactly?" I asked. Randall explained it gently. Power of attorney over finances. Property management oversight. Suzanne's name on my accounts. "Just for simplicity," he said. "Just in case." I folded my napkin carefully. "I'll think about it," I said. Philip, who had been quiet through all of this, looked at me across the table. He was 12 and somehow the wisest person in the room. He said, "Grandma, do you want me to clear the plates?" "Yes," I said. "Thank you, sweetheart." After they left, I stood at the kitchen sink for a long time. The house felt enormous around me. Outside, the streetlights came on one by one along the block, the same way they had every evening for 37 years. I called Harriet. She listened to all of it. When I got to the part about Randall's speech at the dinner table, she made a quiet sound that wasn't quite a word. Then she said, "What do you want to do?" Nobody had asked me that. Not once through any of this. "I want to protect myself," I said. "And I want my money to do something that matters." "Okay," she said simply. "Then let's figure out how." The meeting with Theodore's estate attorney was 2 days later. Her name was Patricia Ellison's, and she had the kind of calm, unhurried manner that made difficult conversations feel manageable. I brought the printed emails, which I had not mentioned to Suzanne I had found. Patricia read them without expression, set them on the desk, and said, "These are concerning. But they're also useful. They document intent." She walked me through my options carefully. We talked for nearly 2 hours. When I left, I had a clear picture of what I wanted to do and why. I also had, for the first time in 4 years, a plan that was entirely my own. Suzanne called the following Monday. She asked if I'd had a chance to think about the power of attorney. "I've had some thoughts," I said. She sounded pleased. "We could set up a meeting with someone. Make it easy for you." "I've already met with someone," I said. "My own attorney." A pause. "Mom, you didn't have to do that alone." "I wanted to," I said. And then, because I was tired of protecting everyone from the truth, I found the emails, Suzanne. The silence afterward was very long. She said my name once, quietly, like she was trying to figure out how much I knew. "The ones about streamlining," I said. "The ones about getting me comfortable with letting you take the lead." No answer. "I want you to know that I understand you may have been frightened," I said. My voice was steadier than I expected. "Watching a parent get sick is frightening. But what's in those emails isn't fear. It's planning. And you were planning around me, not with me." She cried then. Genuinely, I think. She said she was sorry, and I believed that she was, in the way people are sorry when they've been caught, which is not entirely the same as being sorry for what you did. She said Randall had pushed her. She said she got scared when I seemed tired all the time. She said she didn't mean it to go so far. I listened to all of it. When she finished, I said, "I love you and I need you to give me some time." I hung up. I sat in the quiet kitchen for a while. Then I picked up my phone and called Harriet, not to process anything, not to talk through the emotions, just to hear a voice that belonged to someone I trusted. She answered on the second ring. "How'd it go?" she asked. "About how I expected," I said. "Are you okay?" I thought about it honestly for the first time in weeks. "Yes," I said. "I actually am. The chemotherapy ended in the spring." My oncologist, Dr. Yolanda Marsh, delivered the news on a Thursday morning with the particular careful optimism of someone who has learned not to use the word cured too quickly. She said the scans looked good. She said we would monitor closely. She said I had responded well. I cried in her office for a few minutes. She handed me a box of tissues and waited. In the parking lot afterward, I sat in my car and thought about what I wanted my life to look like. Not what I wanted it to recover toward, some version of before. What I wanted it to actually look like, going forward. Built deliberately by me. 6 months later, a modest brick house on the east side of Louisville opened its doors as Greer House. I named it after Walter, because everything good I had ever done grew partly from the life we built together. The name felt like bringing him along. Greer House was not a luxury facility. That had never been the idea. It was a transitional recovery home for women over 60, who were navigating serious illness without adequate support. Cancer patients who lived alone, women whose families were distant or absent or simply overwhelmed, women who fell through the space between hospital and home and had no one to catch them. We offered a room, meals, transportation to appointments, someone to sit with them during treatment if they wanted company, and the particular mercy of not having to explain their situation to anyone who wasn't there to help. The waiting list filled within 3 months of opening. Harriet Bloom became director of patient care. She had left Mercy General after 17 years, which she said she had been considering for a long time. She said Greer House felt like the thing she had been trying to get to, all along without knowing it had a name yet. I am asked, sometimes, whether I regret changing my will. The question is always asked carefully as if the answer might be fragile. The revised will left a portion of my estate to Greer House directly, and a separate educational trust for young women pursuing careers in nursing and patient advocacy. There is a personal allocation for Harriet, something substantial, which she argued against and I overruled, and there is a smaller, protected trust for Philip. For his education, unrestricted by his parents' access, because Philip showed up to my 7th infusion with a handmade card and stayed the whole 3 hours doing his homework in the chairs beside me, and some things deserve to be remembered in writing. Suzanne is not written out entirely. That decision surprised even me. Patricia had asked if I was certain, and I had thought about it for a long time before answering. What I want her to have, I told Patricia, is a letter. The letter took me 3 evenings to write. I told Suzanne what I had seen in those emails and what it had cost me to understand it. I told her I knew she had come from a place of fear, even if it expressed itself as something uglier. I told her that the love I had for her was not something that could be strategized around or documented in a filing cabinet. That it was real and ongoing and would survive even this. And then I told her clearly that love and trust were not the same thing, and that one could persist even when the other had been damaged. I told her I hoped she would choose, going forward, to be the person I had always believed she could be. I meant it. That's the thing about mothers that never changes. Even after everything, we keep meaning it. The letter would be delivered after my death, along with a modest financial inheritance. Enough to matter, not enough to rescue someone from poor choices. The rest would go to Greer House and to the women who needed it most. I did not regret any of it. On the day we opened Greer House, I stood in the small front garden while staff arranged chairs inside and volunteers set out coffee urns. The morning was warm and very blue. A mockingbird was in the redbud tree near the porch, cycling through its entire repertoire. Harriet came to stand beside me. She had paint on her wrist from touching up a doorframe the day before, and she hadn't noticed. "Ready?" she said. I looked at the sign above the door. The lettering was simple, dark green on white. Greer House, a place to recover. Walter used to say that a good life wasn't built from dramatic gestures. It was built from all the unremarkable moments when you chose to pay attention. The small cup of coffee brought to someone who was cold. The blanket tucked around legs without being asked. The question that costs nothing to ask and means everything to the person who hears it. Do you want company? I thought about that while the mockingbird worked through its songs and the first visitors turned into the parking lot. "Yes," I said. "I think I've been ready for a while." That evening, after the last guest left and the volunteers had gone home, and Harriet's car disappeared, at the end of the street, I sat alone in the front office of Greer House with a cup of tea and the quiet. No machines, no IV drip, no ceiling tile with a water stain I had memorized out of loneliness, just the sounds of a building that finally had a purpose. My phone buzzed once. A text from Philip. Saw the news thing online about Greer House. I told my whole team about it. They said it sounds really cool. I said my grandma built it. I held the phone and smiled until my face hurt. Some families are not the ones you were born into. Some families are the ones who show up in braids and tired eyes and a heated blanket, who follow you home when you can't trust your own hands on the wheel, who ask what you want and then actually wait for the answer. The people who stay, that's where family really begins.